Hello my friends and welcome back to the channel. Today I have another alteration video for you. We are going to take in some jeans. So these were dropped off by a customer. The waist is a little bigger around than she needs it to be. She wants a couple inches taken out of these pants. So we're going to do that and I'm going to show you how. The first thing we're going to do is assess how much we need to take out of this waistband. So the customer wants the pants to have a 41-inch waist. So I got my measuring tape out to see what the waist currently measures. So I got it all flattened out here as good as I could. And I'm going to measure from the very edge on the left here all the way over to the right. Okay, we got about 22. So 22 times 2 is 44. So it looks like these pants are about 44 inches in the waist currently. So we're going to take out 3 inches. The first thing we're going to do is take our seam ripper and we're going to remove this belt loop and we're going to remove this line of stitching and this line of stitching just in an area about that big so that we can lift that waistband up, and we're going to create a seam in the waistband that takes those 3 inches away. And then I'll show you what to do here with this flat felled seam to take the additional from that. So get your seam ripper. And we're just going to go in here. We're just going to start picking these stitches. And the ones along the top of the belt loop as well. If you use your seam ripper like this by putting the ball inside the seam and then push like that, sometimes you can pop the seams open more easily, and the ball helps prevent this blade from cutting the actual fabric. If you go in this way, sometimes there's more of a risk of cutting the fabric, but if you go in with the ball, it protects it. See how sometimes you can get a nice run of stitches popped open that way. You can see I'm kind of holding open the seam. If you put a little tension on the threads before your seam ripper goes to cut them, by kind of pulling that open, it makes it easier. You can also use your seam ripper on the outside of the seam and just pull individual stitches out like this. Okay, now our waistband is detached, our belt loop is detached. Now we need to open up the flat felled seam here. Okay, I think we have these pants adequately opened up. So it depends how far you need to go down, depends on how much you're taking from the seam. So we're taking 3 inches. So we can rip more if we need to, but once we take that 3 inches, we just want to be sure that we can extend the seam down in a very gradual way. So the more you're taking, the further down you'll need to open the back seam. Okay, so now that we've ripped it open, the first thing we're going to do is take this waistband and open it up like this. And we're going to fold it right sides together, right along the center. So find where the middle is. So right here, and fold it there. Like that. Place a pin just to keep it folded. And then open all of these all the way out. Get your raw edges aligned. Place a couple more pins. Make sure nothing's folded up weird inside there. We want this totally flat because we're going to sew right here. We're going to create a seam down the middle of the waistband where there wasn't a seam before, but it's going to be covered up by the belt loop. Okay. So now that we're opened up, folded right sides together and pinned, now you're going to take your tape measure and measure over. I'm going to do 1.5 inches because I'm taking 3 inches out of this waistband. So whatever you're taking out, you're going to divide that in half. And then you can draw a line to sew on. So 1.5 inches. My fold wasn't quite straight. There we go. Okay. Okay, so that's where we're going to sew our first seam. So I got my machine threaded with a dark blue that's going to match the jeans. And we're just going to do this on a regular straight stitch. You can do this part on your regular machine. You can actually do the whole thing on your regular machine, but for the heavier seams, I'm going to jump over to my industrial Juki. Okay. So just position that right on the line, so your needle's going to go down. And I like to start in a little bit, lower the presser foot, take out that first pin. That way I can begin with a back stitch. Back it up to the beginning. Okay, and then we'll go forward. Oops. And just smooth this all out right before your presser foot can get to it, so you're not going over any extra folds or layers. Just make sure in here. And the more you open up in the waistband, the easier this part will be. And with a back stitch. Alright, let's take it out. Okay, that looks good. So then you can cut this out if you know you're never going to want to let these pants back out. But whenever possible, if I do things for customers, I like to leave the possibility open. If I can't, if I have to cut it off, I will. But if I can keep the extra fabric in there without it being overly bulky, that's what I will do. So you can see here mine wasn't exactly lined up. The top of this and the top of this is slightly off. But I am not bothered by that. It's going to be covered by the waistband. If it was more drastic, I would rip that out and redo it. So I'm going to leave this in, this extra flap. So I'm just going to fold it to one side. And fold it all back up, and it's going to go inside there. So there's our new waistband. Looks good. So the 3 inches have been taken out of the waistband. Now we have to take the 3 inches out of the top of the pants where they meet the waistband, and then taper that down so it's a gradual seam. So what we need to do, there's a few ways you could do this. You could flip it inside out and you could sew a seam that went like that, like a normal seam. That would be fine, but it wouldn't look the same as the flat felled seam that you usually see on the back of the jeans, and there would be a point where it would look one way and then it would switch to looking another way. So I don't want to do that. I want to make it look as close to original as possible. So I'm going to recreate this flat felled seam. So I'm going to look at these pants. Okay, here's where our new center is, where we made this seam. And you just want to kind of look, is it truly centered? And it looks like it is from belt loop to belt loop. We can measure. About 3 1/8 inches. And about 3 1/8 inches. So it looks like our seam we created is centered. Oops, sorry. So from here to here is about the same as from here to here. That's good. Okay, so now our new flat felled seam needs to go right down the middle. So we're going to refold this like this. So you can kind of visualize that the new seam will be folded down the middle like this. And that's how it's going to look. So And just line up these seams here, and that's where I'm going to start pinning. So we'll pin, and we have to make sure we're not pinning into that extra layer under there, which is the front of the pants. So I got my hand in there to stop that. And now if this isn't going smoothly down here where you can get a smooth transition from this fold to just kind of open up into the old flat felled seam, if that isn't smooth like this one, you need to rip further down. This looks good. So we will stitch just like they did here. I'm going to continue this line, and I'm going to come all the way up with the gold on the industrial machine so it looks just like this. And then I'm going to continue from here all the way up. And then after we do that, we'll attach this. But we also need to consider what we want to do on the inside. So again, you could cut the excess out and you could actually fold it all up inside that flat felled seam so it was fully encased inside like it would be. But I do like to leave the option open, especially if this is for a customer. I just never know if they might have a change of heart, if they might think too much was taken and they want me to reverse it. So I like to leave every opportunity open for myself to do that. So I'm going to leave the excess fabric in. So we can leave it just like that, and then where our stitching would be, like I can feel the edge there, our stitching would be over here, but then that leaves a little flappy thing here. And if it's not too much, you could maybe just leave that, and then we can tack it down right here where these stitches are, because we don't want to put any stitches where there aren't stitches, because that'll look out of place. So if this is an okay amount of a flap, then we can tack it down by stitching through this on the front side, so then it's invisible but it's holding it down, so it's not like an annoying flap inside of there. If the flap is too big that it's still going to be annoying, you can give it a fold, and like here's the other piece, you can actually fold it right around that, and then it's more like a real flat felled seam that looks finished on the inside and the outside. And I think we could actually do that for this one. I'm just going to tuck all of that in under that other seam allowance. Look at that, super clean. But this is going to be very thick, so this is fine with my industrial machine, but if your machine might not go through that, so it might be a better option to just leave that flap. It's not that big a deal. Whatever you need to do. And you can also cut this out, whatever you want to do. You have options. Lots of options. So to get that to stay, I'm going to put a pin on this side right now, but I'm going to take it back out. I don't like to have pins on the underside while I'm sewing because I will hit them, but they're just here temporarily. Okay, so they're there temporarily. Now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to place some more pins so that I catch all that stuff those inner pins were holding, so I can remove the inner pins. looks ready. Okay, I got the Juki threaded up with this gold color that's gonna match the original stitching on these pants. And we're going to go in here. And I'm gonna sew my first line of stitching. I just moved that waistband out of the way. We're not attaching that yet. First line of stitching is gonna go right close to this edge, all the way down and meet up with the original line here. Okay, so here we go. Always be careful, feeling underneath that you're not sewing through the front of the pants or anything extra. We don't want to use the seam ripper any more than we have to. And then when we get down here, we want to make sure that this is going to be a nice transition. So just smooth, smooth, smooth this area out. So just go a little bit beyond the original and backstitch. I looked inside and I noticed my flap came unrolled when I took my pins out. So I'm going to re-roll that up inside there, recreate that flat felled seam back in there. We're ready for line 2. So, if you wanted to, you could start from the bottom. I just find it easier to start from the top. But we're just going to look at how far this measures and then either measure it and mark it or just eyeball it. Okay. So I'm going to just look how far my presser foot needs to be from the other seam to make that good. So if I put the edge of my foot up against this line, it should make the needle fall right on that other one. So I'm going to do that as a guide. Okay, meet up with the original line, go a little bit beyond. Uh-oh, I suspect I might have done what I said not to do, so I'm not going to backstitch. I think I might have sewed a couple stitches into the front of the pants. So let's just stop and check. It's a little hard to see what I'm doing and have this camera attached to me, and I know the camera's probably wobbling, so I do apologize for that. Okay, I did not sew through the front, but that's okay. Okay, now I am going to go in and backstitch to lock that in. Just to be sure. So right where I was just then was right here. Just redo a little section. And backstitch. Okay. So this looks really good. Before you go to the next step, you want to make sure that the amount you took from the waistband and the amount that you did take from this actually was the same, and that it lays flat now like this, so that when we stitch this on, one's not going to be bigger than the other, it's going to fit. So if it doesn't, at this point you can adjust. This seam would probably be the easiest to adjust if you needed to do that. Looks good on the outside. Let's look on the inside. Okay, now this looks good, but you can see my flap did not get caught completely. So what I'm going to do now, just to keep it a little more tidy, is I'm going to stitch right here, just through the seam allowance. None of this is going to go through to the front. I just want to stop the raw edges from coming out. We'll still have a little flap on the inside. It will not even be noticed if I do that. So I'm going to do that. Next thing we're going to do is attach our waistband. So I'm just going to cut off all this extra stuff here. Okay, and then just going to get all of this folded up inside of these little hems, so that it's all encased like that. All those raw edges, even though there's like 3 layers, they're all in there now. So before I even attach that to the rest of the pants, I'm just going to stick a pin in that because I know that's going to want to come back out. And if you do cut yours, it'll be a lot easier. And we're just folding along that original bleached out fold. Same thing for the inside of the waistband. I just want to get my seam allowance fold that I'm keeping in line, all the raw edges in line with that part of the waistband, and then fold it along that original fold. And then we'll put some pins there. Okay, so you can see how nicely the pants are going to fit into the waistband we just need to stitch right here, and we'll have the belt loop right there, and then we'll need to stitch right here. So we're just gonna put that up in there, inside the waistband, and then all the pins that we already have in there, we'll just take out and put back in now that the body of the pants are up inside the waistband. And you'll just want to make sure that you can feel that when the inner and the outer of this fold of the waistband are actually in line with each other, because we're going to hope to stitch one stitch that's going to get it all in there included. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab another pin, and I'm going to check. There's that part of the waistband. I'm going to pinch that and flip it over. The pants body is up inside the waistband. So now I'm going to poke this pin through right along where the stitching line will begin, and I'm going to hope that it appears right where the stitching line needs to be on the other side, and it did. So that's what we want. So I'm actually going to pin these going sideways just to keep that in line. So, and then so it's going in the line of stitching, it's coming out where the line of stitching is going to be, and same for the back side. So that's what we want. So we'll go all along this seam. Now some of the pants you may repair are going to need the belt loop to be inserted so that it gets sewn down during this step as well. This particular pair of pants was not like that. You can see that it's just, the belt loop's just going to be stitched on down here, and it's going to be stitched on up here. But just check how yours is, because if yours is supposed to be included in this whole bundle, then just stick it in there. Just copy how the other ones are, you'll see what I mean. This is a big bundle of fabrics, so your regular machine would probably struggle pretty badly with this. So if you don't have an industrial machine, you can usually hand crank it, so you can put it through your normal machine, but you have to turn the flywheel on the side of the machine to make it go through. It's probably not going to just go, and even that might be a struggle, and so you might have to even do this by hand, and that is okay too. And if you don't do as many, if you don't leave all the extra fabric inside, it makes it a lot less bulky too. Alright, well, it looks like it's going to work, and I'm going to take out any that were on the back side. Here we go. So I'm just going to start back on the original seam and begin with a back stitch. And we're just sewing right where that seam would be. Oops, got some sticking out here. There we go. Okay. Okay, and then just reiterate the old original line a little bit, and then back stitch. Cool. Okay, looks good. So now we're going to sew the line at the very top of the pants. The one that just goes along the top. So we'll start here, back stitch, and go along there and back stitch. And as I do that seam along the top, I'm going to attach the belt loop at the same time, so it just gets included in that seam. So I'm going to place the belt loop right over top, covering that new seam that we made in the waistband. And then it's going to line up with our new flat felled seam as well, so it's centered. So I'm just going to put it there. And I'm going to pin it on, and then when I sew this along the top, it's going to get included in that. And as I pass over that belt loop, I'm going to backstitch over the whole thing and then go forward again. And maybe even do that again because belt loops take a lot of abuse. So extra reinforcing there is good. Okay, and then backstitch. We're almost there. Now all we have to do is attach the bottom part of that belt loop. So we're just gonna come over here. Make sure you don't sew through the front of the jeans. Always make sure of that. Alright, and just keep that belt loop lined up with our flat felled seam. And then I'm going to stitch right over it a couple times, backwards and forwards. Okay. All right, looks good. Okay, so now let's just check it out here. I'm going to button the So we're all done. Now I just want to measure the waistband and make sure we're at 41 inches like we should be. Okay. Alright, so we're all done. So I just came up here to measure and make sure we're at 41 inches like we should be. So from here over to here, we got about 20.5 times 2 is 41. So we did it. So looks pretty good. So there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful to you in fixing some pants. So if it was, please leave me a comment below. I would love to hear how it went.